Good day, grade 8 students. This is Teacher Ira, and welcome back to our English 8 class. Before we proceed to our new lesson for today, let us first recall our lesson last meeting. So what is idiom? An idiom is a word or phrase used to mean something different from its literal meaning. So who would like to give me an example? Examples are, you can't read my poker face. So the idiom used in this sentence is the phrase poker face, and it means expressionless. My aunt sounds like a broken record. So the idiom broken record means saying things repeatedly. So I guess you learned a lot about idioms. So now I would like you to describe these drums. If you are to own a drum, which will you choose? Is it the red drum or the broken yellow drum? And why? For a musical instrument to produce a beautiful sound, it must be in excellent working condition. It must also have all parts needed. In the case of a drum, these parts are the drum head, the hoop, and the shell. The absence of any of these parts will greatly affect the performance of the instrument and the quality of the sound it produces. In the same way, the meaning of a sentence may be affected if it lacks an essential part like the subject or the predicate. Hence, a subject must both have the subject and a predicate to make it meaningful and to deliver a complete thought. Have any idea if what is our lesson for today? So our lesson for today is all about sentence versus fragment. But before that, here are the objectives you should attain after our lesson. Differentiate between fragment and sentence. Determine whether the given group of words is a fragment or a sentence. And lastly, cite the importance of fragments in composing sentences. How can knowledge of fragments and sentences enable one to write meaningful sentences? Let's have a review. A sentence has two main parts, a subject and a predicate. So what is a subject and what is a predicate? A subject is the one being talked about in the sentence, the noun or the pronoun, while the predicate tells something about the subject, or known as the verb. So what about sentence and fragment? A sentence is a group of words that has a complete thought. It is properly punctuated at the end, while the fragment lacks a subject or predicate but it is punctuated. This is an error that needs to be avoided in formal writing. So let's have a simple activity. Which do you think expresses a complete thought? Efriam Duke was an ancient king of Calabar. Do you think it is a sentence or a fragment? So it is a sentence. Efriam Duke is the subject and it has a predicate which is the auxiliary verb was. Therefore, it is a complete thought. What about this one? If the owner of the drum walk over any stick on the road, so is it a sentence or a fragment? So look at this dependent clause. It begs for more information to make the thoughts complete. So it may have a subject and a verb, but it shows incomplete thought because of the conjunction if. Therefore, it is a fragment. When the tortoise had been in possession of the drum for a few weeks, he became lazy. So do you think it is a sentence or a fragment? So it is a sentence. It clearly shows a complete thought. What about this one? Sent his enemies with full stomachs and in happy frame of mind. So do you think it is a sentence or fragment? Who sent the enemies? The subject is missing. So therefore, it is a fragment. How about this one? The competing vice presidential candidates. So is it a sentence or a fragment? So what happened to the competing vice presidential candidates? So it is a fragment. So what is missing in this fragment? So there's a missing verb. So how are we going to transform it into a sentence to have complete thought? An example is, the competing vice presidential candidates did their best to gather as many votes as they could. Won the presidential race by approximately 7 million votes. So do you think it is a sentence or a fragment? So who won the presidential race? What do you think is missing in this statement? So it is a fragment. And there is a missing subject. So how are we going to transform it into a sentence to have a complete thought? An example is, the oldest candidate won the presidential race by approximately 7 million votes. So the subject in this sentence is the oldest candidate and the predicate is the verb won. Next, despite the allegations thrown at him. So is this a sentence or a fragment? So it is a fragment. This dependent clause has a missing subject and verb. So how are we going to transform it into a sentence? An example is, he continued to run for president despite the allegations thrown at him. Another example, if the majority votes for him. So this is a fragment, and it is a dependent clause. It is started with the conjunction if. In order to make it as a sentence, attach it to another clause or a nearby complete sentence. For example, a candidate for a government position wins when the majority votes for him. Remember, in order for a sentence to be grammatically complete, it must adhere to 3 different rules. First, it must have a subject. Next, it must have a predicate. And lastly, it must be a complete thought. For your activity, refer to the learning guide. If you have questions, feel free to message me at moy.ytimbreza@gmail.com. Have a great learning day!